Sirens tore the midnight as Maya Collins said, "If anyone is there, see me now," and rain hammered the windshield like 1,000 small verdicts. Her sedan skated on the Ashgrove curve, and she whispered, "I am so tired of being lost." The guardrail flashed, metal screamed, and gravity let go as the world rolled slow and weightless. In the spin, a meadow of living light opened where the road should be. Seraphim said, "Maya, you are not ending. You are being unhidden," and the syllables felt like home. The hollow gathered behind her, a genderless shadow, and it purred, "Nothing changes after impact." Pastor Elijah Brooks, waking from a dream, said, "Hold on," as if his voice could braid rain into rope. Dr. Avery Ross studied storm graphs and muttered, "Coincidence," but her heartbeat refused the word. Jonah Reyes sat in a pew and said, "Forgive me." But let her live, while the candles shook. Maya saw her broken locket turning in the air like a planet that had lost its orbit. She said, "If this is mercy, teach me its language," and her chest begged for breath. A roar of wet gravel, a body-shaking thud, and then a shock of air slammed back into her lungs like sunrise. Rain cooled her face, sirens closed in, and the vision's light stayed burning just behind her eyes. Maya lay under a tarp of drizzle as paramedics worked, and she said, "I saw a field of mercy. Tasting rain." Her fingers found the broken locket, and she held it like a treaty with breath she had just regained. Pastor Elijah Brooks arrived from an intuition he could not name and said, "Sometimes heaven taps the glass." The hollow pooled near the puddle, genderless and patient, and it murmured, "It was only concussion." Maya said, "Then why do I feel seen, like the light knew my real name?" The night seemed to lean closer. Dr. Avery Ross checked vitals and said, "Stable," yet her eyes tracked the tremor in Maya's smile. Jonah Reyes hovered at the edge and said, "I was praying hard enough to bruise, trying not to cry." A siren dopplered away, leaving the road quiet except the tick of the engine and breath. Elijah opened his worn Bible and said, "Mercy often comes disguised as interruption." The hollow hissed, "You crashed because you were careless," and the words stung like salt on a wound. Maya answered, "Maybe," but the light did not look at me like a mistake, and the paramedic paused. "Avery," said, "trauma can paint visions," yet something in her voice sounded almost tender. The rain thinned to mist, and the night felt fragile, as if the world had been cracked open for repair. At Ashgrove Community Hospital, Dr. Avery Ross said, "No internal injuries, bruising and luck," and her pen paused. Maya Collins answered, "It felt like being called by my real name, while monitors hummed like bees." "Avery," said, "the brain under shock can stage convincing theater," and she watched for pushback. Pastor Elijah Brooks stood by the window and said, "Even theater can tell the truth if light gets in." The hollow lingered in the corner, genderless and thin as smoke, and it whispered, "You are alone in this." Jonah Reyes stepped through with coffee and said, "You are not. I was on my knees, and I stayed there." Maya closed her eyes and said, Then the prayer crossed the distance, feeling warmth instead of fear. Avery rubbed her brow and said, "I need data." Yet her voice carried a quiet tremor she could not chart. Elijah smiled small and said, "Prayer is a bridge storms cannot tear down," and the room seemed bigger. The hollows sighed, bridges collapse, and it dragged a fingernail of doubt across her ribs. Maya pressed the locket to her sternum and said, "I will walk anyway," and her breath landed steady. A nurse adjusted the blinds, and winter sunlight spilled across the floor like a promise kept. Machines ticked soft, and hope dared to sit down. Pastor Elijah Brooks guided Maya Collins into the hush of the hospital chapel, and pews creaked like ships. He said, "Heaven often speaks in images we can bear," and his hand rested on a Bible worn smooth by years. Maya whispered, "That light felt like love, not flattery," and the confession steadied her pulse. The hollow pooled in the font, genderless and patient, and it hissed, "You broke your promises." Jonah Reyes stood by the door and said, "I know the ache of broken promises. They used to steer me." Dr. Avery Ross lingered at the threshold and said, "What do you do with guilt, Pastor?" Elijah answered, "We turn guilt into confession, and let it become responsibility, not despair. Maya traced the broken locket and said, I want to learn a prayer that is not pretending. Avery said, I catalog pain. I rarely name my own, and surprise flickered through her clinical calm. Jonah exhaled and said, naming it was my first sober day, and his eyes warmed with memory. The hollow whispered, say enough, and you will drown. And the candlelight jittered like doubt. Seraphine shimmered at the edge of vision and said, truth is a door. Humility is its key, and the room breathed. Maya nodded once, as if that key had finally touched the lock she had been carrying for years. That night in her apartment above the laundromat, Maya Collins said, if you are real, meet me halfway, and she faced the window. Seraphine unfurled in the reflection like starlight made gentle and said, you asked for a teacher. I will show you the road. The hollow coiled in the corner, genderless and watchful, and it murmured, dreams are only echoes. Maya answered, I do not want escape. I want meaning, and her fingers worried the broken locket. Pastor Elijah Brooks knelt miles away and said, give her wisdom while his house breathed quiet. Dr. Avery Ross typed notes on neurochemical shock and said, I will not let superstition win, yet doubt needled her. Jonah Reyes stood on the sidewalk below and texted, I am here if you need me, pacing under neon light. Seraphine said, fear is a door, courage is its hinge, and the air trembled like a struck chord. The hollow whispered, choose sleep over change, and the radiators clicked like small warnings. Maya lifted the window and said, then teach me to wake the right way, and the city hummed back. A siren braided the night, and steam rose from street grates like prayers with nowhere to land. Seraphine's glow softened to a companionable hush, and the room felt newly possible. Morning light spilled into Maya Collins' apartment, catching on dust motes that danced like slow embers. She said, I will follow, as Seraphine traced a glowing path in the air, the curve becoming a memory of a playground swing swaying. Pastor Elijah Brooks said, God often teaches through what we already carry, while Jonah Reyes leaned in the doorway, eyes gentled by recognition. Dr. Avery Ross frowned and said, autobiographical hallucination, yet her gaze followed the swing's arc. The hollow, genderless and coiled in the shadow whispered, a child pushed too high. Maya's breath caught, as the memory sharpened, her little brother's laugh ringing bright in summer air. She said, I let go first, voice trembling. Jonah murmured, we all have a moment that still bleeds, and the weight of it settled in the room. Seraphine's glow deepened, and she said, every wound contains a map. Avery turned toward the light as though curiosity could override disbelief. Elijah rested a hand on Maya's shoulder, steadying her like a mooring line in shifting water. Outside, a siren faded into city hum, and the swing shimmered into a doorway of pale, beckoning light. They stood on the old river bridge, weathered boards groaning underfoot. Maya said, I promise to watch him, her voice pulled tight. The hollow draped itself across the rail like oil, and murmured, you watched him fall. Elijah said, memory is precise about pain and vague about mercy. Avery replied, trauma edits truth, her eyes scanning the slow water. Jonah said, let today edit the lie, stepping closer. Seraphine appeared just beyond the railing, light pulsing like a heartbeat, and said, you will see what heaven remembers. A gust of wind curled between them, carrying the scent of wet stone and riverweed. Maya's hands tightened on the cold steel rail until her knuckles whitened. Elijah's gaze stayed fixed on her, his presence an anchor. Avery's phone recorded audio without her realizing, a reflex to capture data. Jonah's jaw flexed as if holding back words he'd regret. The hollow's ember eyes narrowed, feeding on the tension. Above, a gull cried once, a note of both warning and welcome. The river glassed over in a vision, reflecting a boy's laughter. Evan balanced on the rail, 10 years old, fearless, as if crowned by summer itself. Maya said, Evan, I'm sorry, her voice cracking. Seraphine's voice layered over the water. Observe without judgment. The hollow smirked, Confession without change is theater. Avery whispered despite herself. How is this so specific? Jonah said. Some truths refuse to stay buried. Evan turned, looking straight into Maya's grown eyes, and said in a memory voice, You loved me enough to shout stop. The air wavered as though holding its breath. Maya's chest ached at the sound, a tether pulled across years. Seraphine's glow rippled through the glassy surface. Elijah's lips moved silently in prayer. Avery's tablet recorded nothing but static where Evan's image should be. The hollow paced behind them, restless. Jonah's gaze softened in a way that made the moment feel both unbearably fragile and entirely solid. Maya pressed her palms to the rail, the chill sinking into bone. She said, I carry his fall like a second spine. Elijah replied, Then let it become the strength that keeps you upright. The hollow rasped, Or the weight that bends you. Jonah said, We choose every day. Avery's eyes softened, her voice low. Grief hides in clinical language. Seraphine said, Heaven is not erasure. It is integration. The wind braided silence through their hair. Maya's breath slowed, and for a moment she felt her brother's laugh inside that stillness. Elijah's coat flared as he stepped nearer. Jonah rested a hand on the rail beside hers. Avery looked away, as if afraid to be caught caring. The hollow's form thinned in the daylight, shrinking against the truth pressing in. The river whispered under them, timeless, as if keeping its own counsel. Back in the church sanctuary, light pooled through stained glass in fractured colors. Maya said, Teach me to pray like I'm not faking. Elijah replied, Start with the truth in your throat. Jonah said, Mine was, I'm tired of being my worst day. Avery added, Mine might be, I'm afraid of being wrong. The hollow circled the rafters, whispering, None of this changes the past. Seraphine said, But it changes your future's spine. Maya breathed, Then here is my truth. I want peace more than I want control. The colors from the glass shifted across their faces, moving like water. Elijah's eyes warmed as he nodded. Jonah's shoulders eased. Avery's lips pressed into a thoughtful line. The hollow faltered, its form thinning. A draft moved through, carrying the scent of old wood and candle wax. Outside, the bells began to toll, slow and deliberate, as if marking a turning point. Inside, Dr. Avery Ross's lab, walls glowed with monitors streaming neural scans. Avery said, I map visions to neural storms. Maya Collins replied, But storms water fields. The hollow coiled in a dark corner and hissed, Science will unmake you. Pastor Elijah Brooks stood calm, saying, Truth fears no truth. Jonah Reyes leaned against a console, muttering, I once tested my hope until it broke. Seraphine's voice rippled, Knowledge is a lantern, not a cage. Avery adjusted a slider, and the scan's colors pulsed like city lights, patterns flaring in time with Maya's heartbeat. Maya stepped closer, seeing her own brain as a strange, breathing galaxy. Avery's jaw tightened. The data refused her neat category. Elijah moved to stand beside Maya, his eyes warm. Jonah folded his arms, gaze steady. The hollow's ember eyes dimmed, though it lingered in shadow. Seraphine's light spilled toward the center, illuminating both the science and the soul in the same breath. The hollow visited Maya's sleep with soft-spoken bargains. It whispered, Trade the vision for forgetting. Maya murmured, I won't pay with my soul. Elijah said, Darkness negotiates when it's losing. At 2 a.m., Avery sat beside Maya on the couch, offering tea. She said, I don't understand this, but I won't let you be alone. Jonah's message pinged, Hold fast. Outside, rain tapped on the glass like a quiet metronome. Seraphine hovered by the window, saying, Name the fear, and it diminishes. Maya took a deep breath, whispering, That it will fade, and I'll go back to who I was. Avery's eyes softened, hearing more truth than she expected. The hollow's form rippled, shrinking, but its gaze lingered. A siren hummed distantly, swallowed by the wet night air. The room felt like a temporary fortress against something vast. In the church basement, folding chairs circled like a small harbor. Jonah Reyes said, "My drinking cost me my sister's trust." The hollow chuckled, "Keep counting losses." Maya said, "Loss taught me I still care." Avery admitted, "I fear being a fool in my field." Elijah responded, "Humility is not stupidity, it's precision." Seraphine's voice lilted, "You are truer when you stop pretending perfection." The group breathed together, the silence afterward heavy and kind. A coffee urn hissed in the corner, a small domestic anchor. Maya studied Jonah's tattoo, seeing its date differently now. Avery leaned back, her posture loosening. The hollow shrank further into the dimmer light. Elijah glanced around the circle, eyes bright. Seraphine's glow touched every face without overwhelming the shadows. A storm cracked the night as the sanctuary doors slammed open. Wind roared through the nave. The hollow, vast and flickering, said, "You will never be enough." Maya stood, hair whipping, and said, "Maybe I don't need." Avery grabbed a flashlight, beam cutting the rain-mist air. Jonah braced against the doors, muscles straining. Elijah lifted his voice in prayer, strong and steady, words binding like rope. Seraphine shone brighter, candles steadying in defiance. The hollow's form wavered under the combined stand. Lightning flashed through stained glass, scattering jewel-toned light across the floor. The storm pressed, then hesitated. Maya's breath burned in her lungs, but her stance held. Avery's jaw clenched in focus. Jonah's boots slid an inch but held ground. Elijah's prayer climbed like a hymn into the wind. Seraphine's glow sealed the cracks until the doors eased shut. After the storm, the sanctuary felt hushed. Avery said, "If I publish this, my reputation burns." Elijah answered, "Sometimes we keep a miracle like a seed, not a headline." Maya said, "I'm not holy, I'm just hungry." The hollow muttered, "Hunger makes you weak." Jonah smiled faintly, "Hunger makes you move." Seraphine said, "Blessed are those who ache for what is right." Candles flickered gently, smoke curling toward the rafters. Avery's flashlight rested on the pew, now switched off. Elijah closed his Bible, the sound deliberate. Maya touched her locket, feeling its weight. Jonah exhaled, slow and steady. The hollow lingered above in the dark, quieter now. Outside, rain softened to a steady cleansing fall. The scent of wet earth crept into the room through the cracked door. It felt like a pause between storms, full of breath. Under a pewter sky, the cemetery lay still, except for wind threading through bare branches. Seraphine led Maya Collins between weathered stones until they stopped at a modest granite marker. "Ati," Maya said, "I have avoided your name." The hollow perched on the headstone whispering, "Because it condemns you." Elijah Brooks countered softly, "Because it costs you." Dr. Avery Ross crouched to place a small white flower, murmuring, "For evidence I cannot measure." Jonah Reyes crossed himself, saying, "For the boy who taught us to be brave." Seraphine's voice was a balm. "Grief is love wearing winter." Maya touched the engraved name, Evan Collins, and closed her eyes against the ache. The hollow's ember gaze flickered, feeding on her silence. Elijah's hand hovered near her shoulder, offering steadiness without intrusion. Jonah's breath smoked in the cold. Avery's fingers brushed damp moss from the stone. The wind sighed low, as if the ground itself remembered. Maya's fingers traced the chiseled date. "I was 13, and thought I was invincible." The memory rushed in, kids cheering on a summer dare. The hollow hissed, "You loved the dare more than your brother." Seraphine said, "Courage without care is recklessness, but care can grow." Elijah murmured, "Let repentance be a gardener." Avery asked, "What would you tell that girl now?" Maya's throat tightened. "Choose his hand, not the moment." Jonah's eyes glistened, his own regrets stirring. The hollow shifted uneasily, the certainty in her voice like salt in its smoke. Wind stirred the flower Avery had placed, tilting its petals toward Maya. Seraphine's glow warmed against the gray. Elijah's breath clouded in the cold, a visual echo of the words he didn't say. Jonah's hands flexed, a silent prayer for second chances. Back in her apartment, rain streaked the windows. The hollow leaning against the wall said, "You only changed because you were scared of dying." Maya answered, "Fear cracked me open, yes, but love is growing me." Avery exhaled, "I feel like I'm watching someone rewire." Jonah said, "We call that grace." Elijah added, "It's slow and unstoppable." Seraphine smiled, her light tasting like rain on hot stone. Maya touched her locket, now less a wound, and more a compass. The hollow's form thinned, fading at the edges. Avery closed her laptop, the work unimportant for the moment. Jonah poured coffee into mismatched mugs, the steam curling like prayer. Elijah stood at the window, watching drops chase each other down the glass. Seraphine's glow bathed the room in a quiet that was not emptiness but readiness. A letter arrived, its handwriting hauntingly familiar, Evan's best friend from that summer. Maya unfolded it with shaking hands. The words confessed, "I pushed him to the rail first." Maya whispered, "I wasn't the only one." The hollow screeched, "Share blame, dilute guilt, stay stuck." Elijah said, "Truth doesn't dilute, it clarifies." Avery murmured, "So the memory lied by omission." Jonah nodded, "Shame ate its love restores." Seraphine said, "Here begins the unburdening." Maya's pulse thudded in her ears as she reread the lines. The hollow's form rippled with agitation, edges unraveling. Elijah's gaze stayed calm, anchoring the moment. Avery set her hand on the table beside the letter. Jonah's jaw tightened with quiet empathy. Outside, a bird landed on the sill, shaking water from its feathers. They met the man from the letter at the river, his hair threaded with gray, eyes tired. He said, "I have carried this like rust." Maya answered, "I have carried it like armor." The hollow slithered low, murmuring, "Change nothing," rewound each other. Elijah said, "Let confession be a bridge." Avery's eyes held the man's with measured compassion. Jonah stepped forward saying, "I forgive you." Maya breathed, "So do I." Her voice steady. The hollow's form recoiled, shrinking to a wisp. Seraphine's glow brightened until the water shimmered gold. The man's shoulders dropped, the weight visibly leaving. Elijah's lips moved in a prayer of release. Avery tucked her hands into her coat, holding the moment in silence. Jonah's smile was small, but certain. The river's current carried their words away like offerings. "That night," Seraphine said, "heaven will show you more." And the apartment dissolved into the luminous field again. Evan ran laughing through a sea of colors that moved like song. Maya whispered, "You are safe." The hollow paced the edge, muttering, "Sentiment." Elijah's prayer threaded into the vision, "Guide her." Avery stood frozen, breath slow, seeing what she refused to call a miracle. Jonah's voice came quiet, "Let it change us." The air hummed like a chord held in eternity. Maya reached toward Evan, her fingers brushing light, and the warmth flooded her chest. The hollow's ember eyes dimmed but did not close. Seraphine's radiance deepened, colors swirling into patterns like constellations. Elijah's voice steadied the space. Avery's hand twitched toward her phone, then stayed. Jonah clasped his hands in silent thanks. The vision wrapped around them like a truth too vast for speech. Evan's laughter softened, his eyes solemn. "You were never alone on that bridge." Behind him, their late mother appeared, smiling through tears. Maya breathed, "Mom." Seraphine said, "The communion of love is larger than your fear." The hollow recoiled, whispering, "Too many witnesses." Elijah's voice murmured from afar, "Some revelations are gifts to carry quietly." Avery swallowed, admitting, "I felt something like reverence." Jonah wiped his eyes, unashamed. Maya stepped closer, her hand nearly touching her mother's. The air shimmered like summer heat over water. Seraphine's light framed them all, holding grief and joy in the same palm. The hollow drifted further away, edges dissolving. Elijah's presence anchored the moment without intruding. Jonah's shoulders dropped, the burden eased. Avery's eyes reflected the light she couldn't define. The vision shifted, Seraphim said. Your vision saved more than you. Threads of light stretched from Maya's near death to Jonah's choice to seek amends, Avery's loosening grip on certainty, and Elijah's quiet fear that his prayers were only habit. Maya said, "We are stitched to each other." The hollow snarled, "Cut the thread." Elijah confessed, "I was afraid. God stopped listening." Avery whispered, "I was afraid I stopped." Jonah said, "We are listening now." The threads pulsed brighter, humming with shared truth. Seraphim's hands moved as if weaving. Maya felt the pull in her chest, not as loss, but belonging. The hollow's smoke thinned under the light. Elijah's voice steadied, Avery's gaze held. Jonah smiled faintly. The vision held them in its loom. In her lab, Avery read an email from a journal requesting commentary on unusual recovery phenomena. She said, "I can write without betraying you." The hollow cooed, "Trade wonder for applause." Elijah said, "Tell the truth you can tell." Maya replied, "And I will tell mine in living, not publishing." Jonah added, "Both are testimonies." Seraphim smiled, "Let humility pilot." Avery's fingers hovered over the keyboard, choosing words carefully. Outside the window, clouds parted, sunlight threading through. Maya stood nearby, arms crossed but relaxed. Jonah set a mug by her hand. Elijah's text pinged on her phone, "Proud of your courage." The hollow lingered outside the circle of light, unwilling to step in. Avery exhaled, the decision made. The hollow whispered, "Give up the locket, and I will give you sleep." Maya said, "I'll give up the lie, not the love." She snapped the chain, not to discard but to mend it. Elijah said, "Rest that comes by theft is unrest." Avery nodded. "You're choosing integration." Jonah grinned. "New chain, same heart." Seraphim breathed. "This is repentance turning into art." The hollow hissed, edges curling away. Maya's hands worked carefully with a small repair kit, silver links catching lamplight. Elijah's presence was steady, Avery's approval quiet but real. Jonah held pliers, assisting without taking over. The glow in the room shifted warmer, anchored in choice. Outside, the rain had stopped. Word reached them of a teenager planning a dangerous jump from the river bridge. Maya Collins said, "Not again," her voice already breaking into a run. Jonah Reyes matched her stride, determination flashing in his eyes. Avery Ross dialed emergency services, her tone clipped but urgent. Elijah Brooks gathered townsfolk in the church, leading prayer like a rallying drum. The hollow, swollen and jagged, rose over the churning water. "Repeat the story, call it fate," it bellowed. Seraphim appeared on the bridge's far side saying, "Break the pattern." Maya cupped her hands to her mouth and shouted, "You are loved more than this dare." The teen's eyes flickered, torn between thrill and terror. Wind barreled down the span, rattling the old rails. Jonah's boots hit the boards hard, every step a promise. Avery's voice on the phone stayed steady despite her shaking free hand. Elijah's prayer echoed in the wind like a heartbeat. The wind shoved hard, making the teen wobble on the rail. The hollow hissed, "Jump!" Seraphim placed a hand on Maya's shoulder, steadying her and said, "Stand in the space between fear and love." Maya stepped onto the walkway edge. "I know the dare that steals brothers," she called. Jonah leaned over, hand outstretched, "Take my hand." Avery cupped her mouth, shouting, "We've got you." Elijah's prayer rose louder, words rolling like waves toward the boy. His eyes darted to each of them, then down to the water. The wind howled again, lifting the hem of his jacket. Maya's heart hammered in her chest, her boots braced against slick wood. The hollow's tendrils stretched toward his ankles. Seraphim's glow brightened, a beacon in the storm. Jonah's fingers flexed, ready to grab and not let go. The hollow lunged, flinging splinters like knives. Maya shouted, "I am not your mistake," and leapt, gripping the boy's jacket. Jonah anchored her waist, boots skidding on the wet planks. Avery locked both arms around the rail, holding them steady. Elijah's voice surged, "Life, choose life." Seraphine's radiance exploded like sunrise breaking storm. The hollow shrieked, its smoky body shredding in the light. The teen's scream broke into sobs as he was hauled back over the rail. Rain sheeted sideways, drumming against their backs. Jonah's grip tightened until Maya was upright. Avery's chest heaved, breath coming in ragged bursts. Elijah's eyes shone with fierce relief. The hollow's remnants twisted into the wind and vanished. Seraphine's light softened but lingered, painting the soaked wood in gold. On the safe side of the rail, the teen collapsed, sobbing, "I didn't want to be invisible." Maya held him and said, "You are seen." Jonah added, "We all ache that way." Avery, shaking, said, "I have never been more sure of something I can't measure." Elijah whispered, "Miracles are made of many small obediences." Seraphine's glow softened, no longer a blaze but a warm ember. The boy's shoulders trembled against Maya's chest. Jonah's arm circled both of them, steadying. Avery wiped her eyes, almost embarrassed. Elijah rested his hand on the boy's head in blessing. The river below flowed on, uncaring yet somehow witness. The hollow was gone, leaving only the faint smell of burned paper. Seraphine's presence felt like a steady heartbeat in the air. That night the hollow's remnants hissed along the gutters. "I'll be back in subtler shapes." Maya, on the rooftop with her friends, said, "Then, I'll keep watch with friends." Avery raised her mug, "To mysteries that make us kinder." Jonah laughed, "To second chances multiplied." Elijah added, "To the God who wastes nothing." Seraphine lifted a hand, and a bell-like note seemed to ring inside them all. The city below glimmered under clearing skies. Steam curled from their cups into the cool night air. Maya's locket caught the rooftop lights whole again. Jonah leaned back against the railing, looking more at peace than in years. Avery's gaze lingered on the skyline as if searching for patterns in the lights. Elijah closed his eyes, absorbing the quiet. The hollow's whisper faded completely into the night. On Sunday morning, sunlight spilled through stained glass, scattering color across the congregation. Maya Collins stood at the front, holding her repaired locket. "I thought heaven was escape, it was invitation." From the pulpit, Elijah Brooks replied, "We practice remembrance together." The hollow's voice echoed faintly from far away, "You'll forget." Avery Ross bowed her head, saying softly, "Teach me to thank what I cannot chart." Jonah Ray's voice trembled, "And to forgive again tomorrow." Seraphine's glow arched over the pews, like sunlight turning air into gold. The choir hummed a low refrain under the spoken words. The scent of beeswax and wood polish hung in the air. Maya's heart beat steady, no longer in flight but in anchor. Outside, church bells chimed a slow, steady cadence. Elijah's eyes met hers, and both smiled at the same truth. On the church steps afterward, the saved teen said, "I want to learn to be visible the right way." Maya answered, "Start with truth and service." Jonah said, "Well, mentor you." Avery added, "And I'll check on you each week." The hollow flickered like heat on asphalt, muttering, "Attention fades." Elijah smiled, "But love stays." Seraphine traced a glowing pattern in the air, its shape like a path bending toward the horizon. The teen nodded, his shoulders straighter than before. Maya felt the weight in her chest shift into something lighter. Jonah's hand rested briefly on the boy's shoulder. Avery's phone was already open to a calendar. The town sounds, car doors, voices, birds, layered softly in the background. The hollow thinned again, struggling to hold form in the sun. At home, Avery typed carefully, finalizing her commentary for the journal. "I wrote about recovery, not the vision," she said. Maya replied, "You told your truth." The hollow sneered faintly, "Coward compromise." Jonah said, "Courage often looks like restraint." Elijah's text pinged, "Proud of your integrity." Seraphine whispered, "Wisdom is the art of wait." Avery closed her laptop, peace not as victory, but as alignment settling into her shoulders. Maya's reflection caught in the dark screen, her locket glinting faintly. Jonah's photo of the group leaned against Avery's desk lamp. The hollow lingered at the room's edge, gaze unreadable. Outside, the sky shifted toward evening, the clouds feathered with soft gold. At dawn, Maya returned to the quiet bridge. She touched the rail and said, "Evan, we are different now." The wind lifted her hair as if in answer. The hollow murmured from beneath the planks, "Regret can still drown you." Seraphine said, "But gratitude floats." Elijah's footsteps approached from behind. "Shall we pray?" Jonah called from the path. "And then get pancakes." Avery laughed. Data confirms pancakes heal many things. The sunrise burned off the mist, revealing the calm river. Maya closed her eyes, letting the wind carry her words. The hollow's voice was quieter, as if muffled by the morning light. Seraphine's glow reflected in the rippling water, a shimmer that lasted longer than the wind. In the meadow of her memory one last time, Seraphine said, "Heaven did not erase your story, it taught you how to read it." Maya answered, "Then my soul's journey is to keep reading with others." Evan's laughter echoed like distant bells. The hollow shrank to a small, manageable shadow at her heel. Elijah said, "Walk humbly." Avery said, "Walk curiously." Jonah said, "Walk together." Maya placed the mended locket over her heart and whispered, "I am not alone anymore." The field of light folded into the ordinary street, but the air still shimmered faintly. Seraphine's form lingered one breath longer, then became the light itself. The sound of the bells remained, even when the silence returned.